guys, there you have it. We just got done with the dyno on the CTSV. We're gonna walk you through the build here and we're gonna show you everything that we did. We took this whole motor out, we tore it down, cleaned everything. It's a little bit high mileage car and we were doing an extensive modification. So we did cam upgrade, lifters, poured and polished the heads, all new valve train, added some boost to it. Car came in making about 585 to the wheels, already slightly modified on the 85 and pulley and headers and stuff. So we just got done with the dyno and got a 709, 735. So a healthy horsepower and torque gain. Now we're gonna take the car out on the street, we're gonna verify the data log, and we're gonna turn it back over to the customer, but check out the video. All right guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're gonna dive into this motor that we got sitting in front of us. It's a 6.2 liter LSA motor. It comes out of this car right here. So this is a 2012 CTSV V2. So a little bit older car, and the reason why we got this motor in front of us is because this car came in for heads, cam, and some other upgrades, and we're gonna be adding some boost and some recoil. So being that it has almost 80,000 miles on it, I want to pull this engine out and I want to go through it and inspect everything and make sure everything was tight and right before we go add a whole bunch of horsepower to it. So we went ahead, we removed the engine. I've got everything cleaned up. We went ahead and we cleaned up all the carbon off the pistons. The reason I like to do that while I have the opportunity to is because carbon buildup on pistons can create hot spots. Hot spots can create pre-ignition, detonation. That's bad, we don't want it. The actual carbon will ignite before the spark hits and it can create pinging. So we went ahead, we got all that crap off there, inspected all the lifter bores, and just did a general inspection, flipped this thing around, and just made sure nothing looked really messed up. We did actually find that the stock tensioner on this car was broken. Look at that, broken ass tensioner. Something that I've seen many times before, the stock spring tensioner. We actually found the piece in the oil pan. Another thing about pulling the motor to do something like this is we had the opportunity to go ahead and just clean all the gunk, 80,000 miles worth of shit out of this motor, got everything nice and clean. The pickup tube, there were some blockages in there. And as you can see, we got most of our new parts here. We pulled the heads off. We had them redid. Excessive Racing Engines did a really good job. They decked them. They did the valves. They did the guides. We also went ahead and poured and polished them. All new hardware. Everything is checked and checks out good and looks super good. And it's going to make more power because it'll be able to free flow more. Just another little upgrade and just another thing that's worth doing while you're in there instead of just swapping springs and seals. We got all the seat pressures right and everything is brand new and fresh. All the parts have been cleaned and inspected by me. So we are pretty much ready to put this thing together. Brand new oil pump. It's always a good idea to change the oil pump pickup tube O-ring. We'll talk more about that. And obviously we got a new bump stick. So it's a pretty aggressive camshaft right here. And we got some new Johnson lifters. So better than stock, still gonna use the factory buckets. Went ahead and got ARP head bolts, not studs. Reason I like to use bolts in a car like this is because serviceability. You got studs and you're trying to pull a head off by that brake booster, you're not gonna be able to do it. And so we went ahead with the bolts. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna start basically assembling this thing. And we'll talk a little bit about stuff on the way and get it together and then we'll dump it in there.
That was perfect, man.
All right?
Yeah, that was
Let me see.
Huh?
Let me see.
Dude,
Let's see what it looked like. Okay, so what we got going on here is I got a little oil bucket and we got our new oil pump that is bone dry, brand new, as well as some brand new, again, bone dry Johnson lifters, okay? And what we're gonna do is we're gonna put this oil in here and I'm gonna dump it down in the oil pump and I'm gonna dump the rest of it around in this pan and I'm gonna just give this stuff an oil bath. So here we go. Just let that, I get it all in the rotor. Turn that thing a little bit. Okay. Dump the rest of that in here. Like a cooking show, just a little different. This is our olive oil. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and drop all these lifters in here and you're gonna see little bubbles. And this stuff's just gonna sit till I'm ready to get to the step where I'm putting this stuff in, but at least then I know by that time all this stuff has oil in it and nothing is dry. There we go. I'm gonna shake these around. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, another thing, a lot of people don't do this, but this is a brand new timing chain that we got. And these also need to soak in oil because they are bone dry, all these little bearings. So we're gonna put that in there. Okay. There you have it. Now that stuff's just gonna sit while I get to other stuff. And we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna put the cam in and then come back to this and we'll be ready. Okay guys, the next thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put this cam in, but we gotta prep it. So this cam just came out of the bag. Obviously it's a brand new cam and it feels like it's got oil on it, but we wanna clean all that stuff off. That's just to prevent rust and whatnot. So I'm gonna hit it with a little brake clean. Okay, I'm gonna roll it. And top, don't let it fall. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lay it back down on its side. I'm gonna get a clean towel. I'm just gonna go through and I'm gonna wipe this thing off so that's nice and dry. You wanna use a type of towel like this because it doesn't leave a lot of fibers behind. But even then, we still need to get that stuff off there once it's bone dry. So I'll show you how. Our cam, give that a second to air dry. I'm gonna come over here and I'm gonna grab my air hose. So now after I wipe that cam off, whatever fibers from this towel are on there, I'm gonna blow off. Also gonna blow out all the holes. See that? Clean. Next step on that, I'll grab our assembly lube. I'm using Royal Purple. Seems to work good. My hands are nice and clean, don't have any dirt on them. And I'm just gonna butter this thing up like a hot dog. Don't be shy. And we're just gonna rub it in. Make sure every lobe is fully covered. This is the most important step about putting a cam in. So, do not skip this part and don't use regular oil. Use some assembly lube because this cam is new and those bearings are not, and this needs to break in. So, that'll help with the friction that's caused by the break-in process. Now with this build right here, I recommend to the customer that he changes the oil for the first time at half the normal interval. And that's just because there's a lot of new parts going in this motor. So even though the motor itself is broken in, there's new parts that need to be broken in. So there's going to be some foreign material that gets left behind in the oil. Won't miss any spots. Okay, that's done. I need to wash my hands and then I'll come back. All right, so I got the cam ready. It's all lubed up. I got 3 bolts in here. These 3 bolts came right out of the water pump. Nice little LS trick is these make a good handle for the cam so that when you're putting that thing in there, you got a good grip on it. So I'm also gonna take just a little bit of lube here and I'm gonna lube up this front bearing right here. All right, she's ready. Here we go. Nice and slow. I know it looks like there's not much assembly lube on here, but there is plenty. Every time I hit a bearing, I want to rotate. Okay, you'll start to appreciate these 3 bolts the further in you get with this thing. So as I'm getting into the last couple bearings, I'm using these 3 bolts to apply pressure upward on the rear of the cam so I can line up with the last bearing. So it's just a leverage point. There it is. Okay. And we want to spin that cam to that dowel is about yay. Because when we're all timed, that dowel should land about there. Go ahead and pull these out now. All right, so now we got the new camshaft installed, and it's time to put the new cam retainer plate on. It's brand new, also bone dry. So I am just gonna hit it with a very little bit of assembly lube, just right along the gasket surface, just like a dab. Seriously, doesn't need much. I don't need this thing soaked. Okay. All right, so these are the bolts for the cam retainer plate. They already have Loctite installed on them from the dealer, but I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna dab it a little bit in blue Loctite. I always do. Don't want these bad boys coming out, but you wanna be able to get them out if you need to. So blue Loctite, not red. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna drop one in the top. I already got my socket. We're gonna go ahead, try to make sure this surface right here is clean, no debris. I'm gonna put that on there. One. Oh, that's a good dog. That's a good dog. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna run those down with my drill real quick, and then we're gonna torque them. Real light. Torque wrench is already set up. The spec is 132 inch-pounds, or I believe that's 11 foot-pounds. I'm gonna go ahead and use my 1/4 inch. That's that one. Check them one more time. Give them a little love bump if you want. If you do over tighten these, they are a bitch to get out and they'll strip. So that can suck. All right, so I'm getting ready to put the timing chain and sprocket on the cam and crank, but I need to get the motor to top dead center on cylinder 1. And I'm gonna do that by checking that piston is at top dead center. This is cylinder 1. And also the timing gear dot on the crank is pointed straight up. So we got our dowel on our cam straight that way towards cylinder 1. And then we got our crank dot at 12 o'clock, and then when we put our cam gear on here, we'll be in time when we have the dot on the cam gear facing 6 o'clock. So 12 and 6. All right, so we got our cam gear and our timing chain that's been soaking in the oil. We got our new ARP cam sprocket bolts, and we've got blue Loctite on them. Go ahead and we're gonna line all this up. We're gonna line our dowel up on the cam with the sprocket. We're gonna make sure our chain is hooked up. Okay, slip that on, get the bolts started. Leave them loose for a second so we can stand back, check our timing. Pretty simple on this motor. And so we got boom, boom. 6 and 12, cylinder 1 at top dead center. Now we can tighten those down, torque them, and then we're gonna install the timing chain tensioner, then the oil pump, pickup tube, and so forth. Okay, so since the factory tensioner was the spring style that comes on most LS motors is broken, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna upgrade. This is a 6.0 style or wishbone style. You can call it a lot of different things. This is a much better tensioner to run in a higher horsepower application like this. It just won't ever break simply because it's one piece. And it doesn't put a whole lot of tension on the chain itself, but it keeps the chain apart just enough so that there's no slack while it's rotating and slinging around in there. But we're gonna go ahead and put that on there. We're gonna run these bolts down and we're gonna torque everything. All right, got my torque wrench here. Good torque wrench, guys. Don't cheap out on your torque wrench when you're putting a motor together, any motor. Okay, if it's a snap-on torque wrench, I got a 1/4 inch, 3/8, and a 1/2 inch, and I'm gonna use every single one of them on this thing. So everyone's got their purpose. 13 millimeter bolt, 18 foot-pounds. That's that. Boom. Now we're gonna swap our socket, and we're gonna get these 10 mils right here on the cam sprocket. It's okay if the motor rotates a little bit, guys, like it just did when you're torquing this. You can just turn it right back. At that point, our timing is set anyways. It can't move. Tensioner's on. Everything's tight. So we're good to go there. Everything is torqued, and I want to give this thing 1 or 2 spins just to make sure the chain is riding nicely, nothing looks funky, and then we'll reline up our timing dots to make sure. Okay, zoom in right here. That's what you should look like when you're done setting up the timing on an LS motor. Super simple. Everybody kind of overcomplicates this part, but it's right there in front of you. Now, if this was in the car and the oil pump was on here, it can be a little bit difficult to see that timing dot. So what you can do is you can line up this timing dot where it needs to be at the 6 o'clock position, and then if you have the cylinder heads off, or even if you don't, and you stick something down in the cylinder, you can make sure your cylinder 1 is at top dead center, right? And then another good trick is if you have a keyway on your crankshaft, not all crankshafts do, but when you are at top dead center and all your timing is right, this keyway should always be in line with that rod and piston. So that trajectory right there looks good to me. So we're good to go. So we have taken our oil pump out of the oil bath and kind of let it drip a little bit. And you'll see this rotor in here, guys. This is what goes up against the vanes and makes pressure and yada yada, has all these little ridges in it. We're gonna line that up with the ridges on the crank sprocket. Now, if you have a dry sump motor, you probably have an oil pump that has 2 of those rotors, so it can be a little bit tricky. And sometimes you can even use like a little tool or something to kind of just line it up. This one's kind of fighting me. There we go. Okay, so we are engaged there. That means when the crank turns, that rotor will turn. That will create pressure. That's sucking oil from the pan, creating pressure and pushing it into the block. Okay, so we'll get these bolts on here and we'll torque this. Next step is to put the pickup tube on. I cannot stress how important it is to make sure this thing is not only super clean and free of debris, but how necessary it is to change this O-ring that sits right here. This is the part that engages into the oil pump. So before I put this on, I've already cleaned this. I'm just gonna blow it out one last time. I just sprayed it down with brake cleaner again and blew it all out. All right, that's ready. We got our O-ring right here. Make sure it's clean and dry. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a dab of assembly lube right on this O-ring. Get it on the tip of my finger too, and I'm going to rub down this outer diameter where this O-ring sits. Put that on there. Okay. We're going to go ahead, we're going to drop this on here. Now I have the oil pump bolts ran down, but they are not torqued because I do want that thing to be able to wiggle a little bit while I kind of get this stuff in its proper place. As you can see, one of the main caps has a stud where this will sit on, and I felt a nice little click right there. And we're just going to put this right here just to hold it for a second. Okay, and that's what it should look like when it's done. Now the factory setup is just this one single 10mm bolt that holds this pickup tube down into the oil pump. See, but there's clearly another hole. So as an upgrade, you can buy this, which is just a hold down. And you can see that the cutout on one side will make up for this difference, and we will get a nice even clamping force. So with our new O-ring, our new oil pump, our cleaned out pickup tube, and this clamp torqued down, we should have no oil pressure issues whatsoever. Gonna put a dab of Loctite on these. Doesn't need much. Don't have much. We're gonna line that up on there. Run those down. I like to run stuff like this down with my fingers just because if I feel any resistance, I know that I should probably take a better look at what might be going on. This is a very crucial step, so you don't want to mess any of that up. So I'll go ahead and I'll torque these, and then I'll torque these. So you want to torque these first and then torque this. My torque wrench set. Go ahead and run this down. Boom. Right here. Check this one. I'm kind of a freak about torque, so I'll check it like 5 times. Now we are going to torque the oil pump. 18 foot-pounds. Set our torque wrench, swap to the 3/8. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, 18. There we go. Okay, cross pattern. Really, you could do it however you want, but this is the way I always do it. One more time. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. Torque, 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 torque. We got this one right here we got to do. That'll be done. 13 millimeter nut right here. Oh, check that. Oh, we're off a number. There we go. That's why. Sorry, guys. Don't worry. It's not the end of the world. There we go. It'll live. All right, so our next step is to put the oil pan on. With a new gasket, we're gonna reassemble it. One of the nice things about having the motor out, we were able to get 80,000 miles worth of shit that sits in the bottom of the pan that's basically like sludge and gunk and crap and, you know, timing chain tensioners in our case. Take it apart, clean it all out, dry it all off, and we're gonna put the baffle back in it. We're gonna torque the bolts and get it back on the motor. So we got that there. Don't need any Loctite or anything for these. Again, stuff like this, I don't always run down with a gun. Just kind of go by feel. I know everybody wants to just zip everything together with some type of impact gun, but sometimes it's not always the greatest thing when you're dealing with a small bolt. I'll take my sweet ass time, do a good job. Let's set up our torque wrench here. I believe it's 106 inch-pounds on a 1/4 inch torque wrench. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Check them one more time for good practice. Sometimes you can torque a bolt that is on a part that has multiple bolts, and on your second pass you might get them to budge a little bit better just because all the bolts have been ran down and pulled it down flat, so free up a little space. Okay, that's done. All right, so the oil pan's ready to go on the motor. I've already put a dab of silicone right here and here on the front and back corners. There's not necessarily a need to do that on this side of the gasket surface. It is on the other side, but I go ahead and do it anyways. And get ready to drop this thing on here. And when you're putting this on, just make sure that you are aware that there is a pickup tube that you need to line up in the hole with the baffle. Go right past it. Okay, and we'll come down. I put 4 bolts in this thing to start, 1 on each corner. Kind of use them as a guide. Go ahead and get them started. And then we can put the rest of our bolts in. Won't be able to put all of them in just because the front cover will have to be on to get these front 2 on. And then for the rear, same situation. So we'll put the ones we can in and tighten them down, and then we'll torque everything all at once with the front and back cover on it. Most gaskets, we're going to start at the middle and work our way out. Okay, like I said before, we'll go back and torque these once we got the front cover and the back cover on, so everything is synchronized. All right, so we are ready to install the front cover. There's some ridges on this front seal. This is the front crankshaft seal, and it's always important to replace that too anytime this front cover goes on and off, or the harmonic balancer, or the crank pulley, whatever you want to call it, goes on and off and moves past this seal. So I'm just going to put a little bit of sealant on it. I've already cleaned this stuff. I'm going to make sure it's no dirt in this ridge down in here. And if you have a little bit of muscles, you can kind of just put this thing in there and push it down. If not, you can use a mallet or something. I'm going to try and use my little muscles and push it down evenly. You want to make sure it's pushed all the way down to the ridge. Clean that off. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is right now I'm going to be proactive. I'm going to put a little bit of assembly lube right here on this lip, this rubber seal. If it's too dry, you can tear it when you're putting the damper on. You don't want that because then your brand new seal is destroyed and you will have an oil leak. So all this would have been for nothing. Okay, now we're going to turn it around. Make sure it's set all the way back, which it does appear to be. Make sure there's no dirt in there. Now, I know this thing doesn't look super clean, but it is spotless, believe it or not. It just has 80,000 miles on it. Okay. What I'm doing here is I'm just putting a little bit of sealant right here on the corner bottom of the front cover. There is a spot on the gasket that will hold this sealant in. I already have some squeezed out because before I put the pan on, I did put a dab already on that side and this side on the pan. You don't need to get crazy. You don't need to put a whole lot, but don't be stingy. You don't want it to squeeze out and look really messy. Before we put the cover on, we're just gonna wipe this surface one last time. If you see any dirt or anything, now is the time to get it. Little dust, fibers, anywhere. Check our timing one last time. Couldn't have moved because I haven't moved it, but okay, we're ready to put it on. So we're gonna go ahead with our new gasket, our clean cover, and our new front seal. We've got our sealant on there. Just boom, we're gonna say bye to all the stuff that we just installed and torque. There goes one. It's okay. I'm just gonna put these on there to hold the cover on, and I'm actually gonna put these bolts in first from the bottom. Okay, those are started. We'll get the rest of the bolts started. All right, so you want to always tighten the bottom two bolts first. You want to pull this cover down first instead of onto the block first. If you don't do it that way, you're probably going to have an oil leak right here. So suck it down. Gets pulled down side to side. Okay, we'll hit it with the torque. Bottom first. And here we go. Again, go over them one more time.
Let's just have it.
Listen for the click. That's done. Next step to buttoning up the bottom of the motor covers is we're going to just apply a little bit of silicone again on the back corners. Now if you're on an engine stand, this can be a bitch just because there's not a lot of space and we got to get around the rear main seal. Okay, but we're going to do our best. Now another thing is, if you're putting together a new motor, you want to make sure that this barbell is right here in the back of the block. See where my finger is? See that? That's a little barbell, and that right there will make sure that the oil pressure is going to the right cavity. If it's not in there, you're not gonna have any oil pressure, so make sure that thing's in there. We're gonna have to play a little bit of Tetris. See if we can get it up in here like this. That's the ticket. And then we're gonna push that right over the back of the crank. Make sure you put your gasket in, don't forget that. Okay, now we can get some of our bolts. Now, these two funny looking long 10mm bolts, they go right here. Right here. These bad boys. There we go. Now we're fully on. Again, you're gonna wanna pull those ones down first. Right now. It's also a long, skinny bolt, so don't break it. All of our 13mm bolts right here. These bolts are a little different for the back cover, so make sure you don't mix them up. They have a more shallow head so that the flywheel can clear, and they're receded. Guys, sometimes I wait until I have the motor hanging back up on the engine hoist to do this. There's no problem with doing it that way at all, but just for the sake of buttoning up this thing tonight so that we can make sure it's closed up, and then tomorrow all we're going to do is put the heads on. I'll put the lifters in, put the heads on, and get into all that top end stuff. All right guys, so we got the bottom half of this thing buttoned up, covers are on, oil pan is on. You saw all the other stuff we put on. It's all, we're at a good stopping point here. There's some other cars in the shop that need my attention I'm gonna get to before the end of the day. Tomorrow we're gonna come in here, we're gonna drop the lifters down in there, and put the heads on. We're gonna put the crankshaft damper on, and we're just gonna keep going until this thing's all the way built out into a long block, and that's when we'll dump it in the car. All right guys, so we've got the surface prepped, we've got the new lifters and buckets installed, torqued down, everything's clean. We're gonna go ahead and blow out these bolt holes one final time before we put the ARP head bolts in. You wanna make sure you do that so that there's no anything in there that is like liquid or debris, because you'll get improper torque on the head bolt. All right, so what I'm doing here is I've wiped this surface clean one last time, and I'm hitting it with the flame because any fibers that came off the towel will now get burned away. So I'll do that, and then use my bear skin, and I'll wipe it clean. Same thing on the other side. All I'm doing here is I'm putting the cylinder head dowels back on so that the cylinder heads can be in the exact right spot, the locators. Right, so we're ready to drop on the new ported and polished cylinder heads. They're all clean. I went ahead and I blew out all this stuff just to make sure everything's out of there for machining. You do want to make sure that these coolant ports stay on the front. The back ones are blocked off. We got our head gasket on. Make sure the front goes to the front. This is not a hard thing. It says it right here, okay? A lot of people mess that up. So we're gonna go ahead and drop this on. one. I'm gonna stick a bolt in there. ARP bolts. That'll hold it from falling off. Drop the rest of the bolts down in there. Guys, these ARP bolts, they're really good, but you gotta make sure that you set them up right. You gotta put lube on them, the ARP lube. You wanna put it on the bottom of the bolt head, some on the threads. And you wanna make sure that this grooved side goes down towards the cylinder head. That's one side. Go ahead and drop the other side. Cylinder head tighten down, inside out. Right now I'm just running the bolts down, and then I'm going to go through my torque sequence. Now we're going to do our torque sequence in order. Tighten them down in 3 steps, 4 steps. The first one is 30 foot-pounds. All right, the last step, smaller size bolts, 25 foot-pounds. That's it. Heads are torqued. Cool. I'm going to show you how to change LS rocker trunnions and do an upgrade on it. We're going to use bronze bushing and trunnion. The stock trunnions that come in these rockets are pieces of shit. They fall apart. The needle bearings go all down in the motor, and you know, it's a bitch to clean out. So we're going to go ahead and do this. We're going to show you. I got a special tool here. It's pretty easy to do. So this thing's magnetic. We're going to take our rocker. I've already taken the old trunnion out that I also use this tool to push them out. We are going to take our new bushing. I'll put a little bit of lubricant on it. I'm going to back this up. Put it on there just like that. Line it up straight. Push that thing in flush. Okay. And we're going to flip it around and take our trunnion that we've already put some assembly lube on here. And now we got one open side. We got one more bearing to do right here. Put it back in our little tool. We're going to take the flat washer that has the hole in it so we can push it past the trunnion. Got to line this up. So as we're closing it down, we don't fuck up the trunnion. And there we go. Just push it in flush. Once it's pushed in flush, should spin free. Now we're going to take snap ring for each side, snap ring pliers. We'll lay our snap ring on there. This is the easiest way that I found to do this without them flying off and hitting you in the fucking eye or getting lost forever. Spread it, boom, make sure it's seated, flip it around. Take this guy right here. This is the second one. Slide it on there, get that trash off there, and that's it. This thing will not fail. All right, guys, so we got the motor dumped back in the Cadillac. We buttoned up everything that we had to do outside the car. One of the last things I have to do before I put the rest of the shit on is measure the pushrod length. It's extra important on this deal because normally we would just use a regular 7.4 pushrod, which is the factory length, with an LS7 lifter, but in our scenario, we're actually using a Johnson 2110R lifter. So the preload range is different, much different than the LS7 lifter. In addition to that, we've also poured and polished the heads and decked them. So we brought the heads down a little bit, very little bit, just enough to clean them up, and we're running an LS9 head gasket. So we just want to double check our pushrod length, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So I have an adjustable pushrod here. This is just a Camshaft adjustable pushrod tool, and basically you can screw it up or down. So there's an easy way to do this. Come over here. We got a couple rockers just mocked up here just to hold the pedestal in place. We want the pedestal in place. I've got the valley cover off in here because you want to make sure that the cylinder that you're going to actually measure, you want the cam lobe to be on base circle. So base circle is all the way down. So the valve would be closed. So we're going to we got it on base circle. We verified that with our eyes. There's a few ways to do it. I did it this way. I'm going to put this pushrod checker tool down in here. Make sure the lifter's pushed down on the cam. And I'm going to take my rocker arm with no bolt, okay? And I'm going to put it on the pedestal. And I'm going to make sure, I'm going to use my finger as the bolt. And what I want to do is get zero lash. Zero lash means there's none of this shit right here. So that has lash. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this back out and pull my tool out. And I'm going to screw it up a little bit. And I'm going to keep doing that until I've got zero lash. Right there, I've got no lash. So make sure you're holding down all the way on that rocker. You want the checker tool in the cup on the rocker, and you want to make sure the valve rocker tip is on the valve. And right there, we're good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the rocker off. I'm going to pull my tool out without turning it, so we don't want to lose our length. Okay, I'm going to come over here to my table. Got a big ass dial caliper here, and I'm going to open it up a little bit. I'm going to take a measurement. Okay, so we'll put this right here and get it straight. I'll close this bad boy up, and I take my measurement. Make sure it's tight. I've got 7.360. I know that's kind of hard to see because it's worn out. But 7.360. Factory length is 7.400. Now, if you look at the Johnson box, okay, lifter preload, 0.035 plus or minus 10. Okay, so what that means, what we're going to do is we're going to take our measurement, our 7.360, and we're going to add, do a little math right here, the preload. And that's going to be our pushrod length that we need to get. 7.360 plus 0.035. So our pushrod length needs to be 7.395 plus or minus 10. So we're actually going to be okay using the stock length, not stock pushrod, but stock length pushrod in this motor. And we're going to use a hardened chromoly 80 wall pushrod, but at least now we know our size. Now, the worst that can happen is if you're a little bit off on this, you may have a little bit of a noisy valve train, not a big deal. You could just pull them out and change the length. Too long, they can hold the valves open. You'll probably have running issues. So we're gonna try these. We're gonna start there. We've got the measurements, so it should be good. Now we got pushrod length measured, so we already have our pushrods. We're gonna get ready to put them in. Quick tip on pushrods, they have a hole drilled in them. Okay, so you always want to blow these things out. You want to clean them out with brake cleaner and then blow them out with compressed air. Make sure there's no clogs because oil comes up through the lifter, through the push rod, and oils down these rockers, drops down onto the spring and all that. And then you want to put a dab of assembly lube on both ends of these. Another important thing is once we drop the push rods in, we're going to put our new rockers on that we did our trunnion upgrade on, but we want to seal the intake bolts. So only the intake bolts, and the reason is now that we've poured it and polished the heads, if you come over here and you look at the heads, take our light and you shine it down into the intake port, and you look right here, we have actually broken into that bolt orifice because, which is normal when you pour and polish LS cylinder heads. So you want to seal that bolt just because you don't want to draw oil in on vacuum and start burning oil. So we're going to drop our push rods in, we're going to bolt all this stuff down. You drop the push rod in, you want to push it down and push the lifter back onto the cam because they're probably up. Hear a click. You also want to make sure it's seated in the lifter cup.
No, I'm trying not to breathe too heavily into the camera.
And Darth Vader
Get your
over
fucking
here.
gas mask or something. So what I'm doing is I am just using my gun to run them down, and then we'll torque them, rotate the motor a few different times, make a few passes on the torque, and then we should be good to go. Important to make sure you kind of hold the rocker while you're tightening it. Once it gets down on its pedestal, it'll straighten out. But you want to keep it straight while it's going down. Okay, so 22 foot-pounds. We're going to go through, we're going to torque them all. We're going to rotate the motor over, torque them again. I do that 4 times. After 4 times, I call it good. Haven't had any problems. Here we go. Wait for the click. Okay, let's put the motor over. My first revolution, I want to go slow. And just make sure there's no hang-ups. If the motor stops at any point, do not force it. It's easiest to do this with the spark plugs out. This way we don't have any compression building up. I'm going to spin over 1 full time. And I'm going to go to a different degree. And the reason we want to do it like that is because we want to take the springs that were under pressure, that got torqued under pressure, and we want to torque them on when they're not under pressure. So going around 4 times and stopping in a few different spots, they'll still budge. Get out of here. Everything feels torqued at this point. Does not feel like they're budging very much. Get out of here. That one did. That one did. I'm gonna give it one for good luck. Okay, so the valve train's all torqued. That's pretty much the last super technical thing that we have to do. Now it's just putting all the brackets on the front, you know, the front accessory drive, and put the headers back on. We'll drop the supercharger on, fill it with oil, cool it, and I guess we'll start it, huh? Guys, we got everything buttoned up on the CTSV. We're getting ready to give it its first startup. We're gonna do that, make sure there's no noises, nothing weird, no leaks, top off all the fluids, then we'll button up all the shielding and make it look pretty, and then we're gonna head to the dyno. It's nice and cool out today, so we're hoping to make a lot of horsepower, and we'll just see how that goes. So let's hear it. Alright, so the smoke is normal. That's just all our greasy fingerprints bleeding up off the headers that we were touching, and kind of gonna take a second to warm up. Colder out today, we're on E85, first start in a while. I just checked the log, we got oil pressure, so all is good there. Give it a second to flow the juices, we'll probably shut it down, let it sit for a couple minutes, let the lifters bleed down, and start it back up. Level of care. Did the same thing to under the hood on his plastics as I did to his oil pan. Okay guys, so we're off the dyno and we're on the road. We got HP tuners hooked up. We're gonna verify that the data and everything is good on the street. See how the transmission feels. And then we're gonna go back to the shop, wash this thing and turn it over. But let's see how it feels from about, let's do a 40 roll. The traction control off. Here we go. Traction is an issue. Plenty of power there to play with. That is pretty cool. I'd say that everything is working good. All these lines look like they're in good shape, so that's cool. I'm sure my tuner will be happy to hear that, as well as the customer. So there you have it, guys. There's like a little sneak peek. We would love to do a shit ton more coverage on this car and this build, but unfortunately the customer does want to get the car back so that he can start enjoying it. So we're gonna probably do some flybys and tell them to come get it.
That's not bad for a 10-year-old car with 80,000 miles on it, man.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Give us a thumbs up, leave a comment below, subscribe, follow us also on Instagram, follow us on Facebook, and as always, keep up with the recoil.
You went out of frame.
Did I really?
Yeah, your head, you walked too close. You need to stay closer to the car.
Fuck.